share them with the applicant so that they have answers or can address them at the next meeting.
Okay.
Or you can just ask them at the next meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I think it would be helpful to ask them ahead of time so that we don't, there's not something we have to wait another, like 2 more meetings for responses to. So if that's a possibility. Okay.
Definitely. You can email them to me.
Okay.
Okay, so it is 7 o'clock. We do have people in the waiting room. We're waiting for a quorum, but I am going to let them in, okay?
Sure.
Oh, and here's Bill. So we'll give Bill a chance to get settled here. And then Brian, when you are ready.
Okay. Okay. I would like to officially call to order the Tuesday, May 18th, 2021 meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission. And pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This public meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but the public can access this meeting while in progress by Zoom video communications. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment by telephone, cell phone, or personal computer using Zoom. And as per our tradition, we will start with a roll call. I am Brian Barabee.
Emily Winter.
Bill Payne.
Rebecca Longball, and I see Lori has joined as well.
Good evening, Laura. Do you want to state your name for the roll call?
I think it's Lori anyway.
Yes, Lori Stevenson, even though it says my father's name. That's in the last Zoom meeting.
That's okay, thanks.
Don't confuse me. It's way too early.
I know.
It is nice to see you or hear from you. And first up, this evening, the Bolton Conservation will now continue a public hearing to discuss an abbreviated request for an abbreviated notice of resource area delineation for 159 Ballville Road, the International / Oaks Golf Course. Rebecca, is there an update? As I see on screen.
Yes, the update is that the applicant has requested a continuation until the next meeting of the Conservation Commission, which will be June 1st, which is also a Tuesday at 7 p.m. via Zoom. The reason why is because the DEP file number has yet to be issued, and therefore no comments from DEP have been issued. And typically the commission likes to incorporate those to ensure that there's no other considerations that they have addressed or are inquiring about.
And remembering our previous conversations from Ballville Road, I don't believe anybody had any questions or concerns. So that said, I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for 159 Ballville Road until our next public meeting, Tuesday, June 1st at 7 o'clock p.m.
Yep.
Do I hear a second for continuing?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, starting with Emily.
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
Lori. Probably should have said John.
No, Lori, no, my internet connection was, it was fading in and out. So sorry.
All right, thank you.
Right.
Okay, so continued. Next up, I was going to say, do you want to, Rebecca, skip down to an update on, oh no, Keys Farm, somebody's coming in for,
Do you want me to skip to the Taggart authorization?
If you can, right? We have 10 minutes before we're supposed to start Century Mill. So
You can't see my screen now. So I had previously sent out as part of your packets the baseline report and land management plan that needs to be signed off on. As long as you approve and authorize that document this evening, needs to be signed off this week. And so that we can submit that for the reimbursement of the $308,000 for the purchase of the Taggart property. So the request this evening is to consider a vote to approve and authorize that document. And prior to making that vote, if you would like to propose any amendments, I am open to that, but I would ask that we accomplish that during the meeting this evening. Additionally, the main portion, the majority of the document is in fact a template or the baseline reporting, where it's photographs and surveys that myself and Brian came out to help as well a few weeks ago, and just filling out that information, along with filling out some information that we had already agreed upon and then shared with the public as we were working towards acquiring this property. So right now, the main focus is the section that talks about prohibitions or on the property as far as use, and then allowed uses. The remainder of it is mostly, like I said, a template form, but if you have any questions on those sections as well, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'll open it up to other members of the commission first. I gave it a better read through this afternoon, and I didn't see anything significant that I had to add, but I will open it up to other members of the commission if there were anything they would like to add, or any questions or concerns, comments regarding it.
I had just a question about the prohibited uses.
Yep.
And I do see there's a comment at the bottom saying that the general rules are incorporated, but there's some on here like hunting. Does that kind of fall into that category with that note at the bottom, so it doesn't need to be posted?
Yep, so that's exactly one of the items that I think, most concerned with. And it's not that we're allowing hunting, because right now the conservation rule and regulation, not only on conservation land, but also on municipal parcels, is we do not allow hunting on public property. Mm-hmm. And that's our current regulations. And a lot of the properties that we have acquired does not restrict hunting in the deeded language itself or the land management plan itself like this, but it does restrict it in our conservation rules and regulations. So the fact that it's not on that prohibited list does not mean that it's allowed. It means that under current rules and regulations, it's still not allowed. And there's another item too, I think with I did incorporate that as an allowed use in terms of a community garden. And that is specific to allowing that on, again, this is on the 38 acres of the Taggart parcel that are under the land grant project agreement. There's 4.5 acres outside of that, as we relayed during the acquisition project and approval. But I just want to clarify that this is specific to the conservation portion of the property. But that is definitely an accurate statement, Emily. And the commission has the ability to say that's a prohibited use, period. But that was one of those items where it's already covered under the rules and regulations. So we may want to leave that flexible for in the future if rules and regulations change 10 years down the line, because maybe we see more pressure from different species in that area.
And is that the same? Is the other one was the collection of plants, animals, soils, and rocks? Is that also kind of covered under our town regulations, so we don't need to mark it as a prohibited?
Yes. Again, the commission has the ability to mark any of them and say, no, we definitively do not want this ever on the property. We never want to consider it. But again, yes, that is covered under current conservation rules and regulations that are in place over all of our properties, which adds additional restrictions onto any deeded restrictions.
Okay. Yeah, as long as it's covered, I didn't, that was the only thing that was kind of a, you know, a question mark for me.
Okay.
But, we're just calling out specific things that wouldn't necessarily be covered under our general town regulations, then I think that makes complete sense.
And you know, I was gonna say, I tend to agree with you, Emily. It kind of leaves us a little bit of flexibility. So if things change, like Rebecca was saying, if things change in the future, we can amend as necessary. But in the interim, we're covered with our standard set of rules. Other commission members have strong thoughts or feelings, proposed changes or amendments?
I just have one question. Rebecca, where, do we know where that 4.5 acres is? That's no part-
Yes. Yep. So it incorporates much of the frontage at the park. So can you see my cursor?
Yes.
So right now it incorporates much of the frontage and then comes back in this area here. So basically it's incorporating the frontage it needs for if the town wants to use it for, again, this is only for town use. So it can be a structure, it can be active recreation, but the area outside of that, not including the 4.5 acres, can only be passive recreation under the land grant. But that 4.5 acres is just about here as far as the way it was cut out. We do have the ability to work within that if it's necessary, but the primary focus of when we pulled out the 4.5 was it's under chapter land. So to pull that out, we wanted to be sure that we had the frontage so that if in fact, whatever the future use is, again, though specific to town use, we can be sure that we can put in an access if it's necessary there. But again, that's years down the line. And the reason the location is also outside of the jurisdiction of the commission, aside from along the frontage there.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Any members of the public here tonight to comment on this one, Rebecca?
Let me. Again, if you'd like to comment, you can use the raise hand function or you can use the chat function as well. And I see no one.
Okay. I was to say, I don't believe you have any further comments on this, Rebecca.
I don't, other than if in fact you vote to approve and authorize this evening, please come in and sign as soon as possible. I will leave it in the Dropbox for you all. But we definitely want to get that reimbursement as soon as possible.
All right. That said, if there's no further comment, I'd like to make a motion. Or is it a motion or it's probably a roll call vote, correct?
Yep, so it can be a motion to vote to approve and authorize the baseline as drafted.
All right. In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we vote to approve the baseline report for the Taggart acquisition and authorize the land management plan as submitted and presented this evening. Do I hear a second for that motion?
Second.
I second.
All right. And we will begin a roll call vote with Emily,
Yay.
Bill,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and Rebecca, and I am an I myself.
Okay, great. And Emily, I just got your note about your computer.
I need a new computer, apparently.
Okay.
Happens too frequently.
Okay.
We're in time for the next one.
Perfect timing. All right, so the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing for a notice of intent filed for Century Mill Road, map 3.D, parcel 75, discussion regarding proposed construction of 3 single-family homes and the widening and paving of an existing gravel driveway. Rebecca, do we have an update on this?
We do. The update is that we have received the proposal from our peer reviewer to, in fact, peer review the stormwater report and the plans, the revised plans submitted related to the notice of intent for this project. And the applicant has requested that the commission approve and authorize that proposal for the peer review to occur, and then continue the meeting until the next Conservation Commission meeting, which will be on June 1st, so that at that time we can continue discussions after having heard from a peer reviewer.
Okay. That said, did everybody see a copy of the proposal from BSC Group? And if so, any issues, questions, comments regarding authorizing BSC Group to be the independent, independent third party reviewer for this part of this project?
And it's in the amount of $3,300.
Which I think I have to mention, right, if we vote on it?
Yes, so that I can then request that from the applicant.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone with questions?
I don't have any questions, but I think BSC Group is a reliable and good company to go with. They've worked on this in the past, and I looked through the summary of the proposal, and it looks like they're going to do everything we need them to with regard to reviewing documents and attending a meeting and providing any supplemental information. So I thought it looked good. I think they covered everything that we would be looking for.
So, Rebecca, what is the best way for me to accept it? Is it a motion, or is it simply I'd like to call a roll call vote for the acceptance of the BSC Group proposal for the peer reviewing of?
I think it would be the latter, and then I would also incorporate request the funds from the applicant for the peer review.
All right. In that case, I'd like to call a roll call vote that we accept the proposal of BSC Group in the amount of $3,300 to present to the applicant as our peer reviewer of choice in this matter. I'm so sorry, Rebecca. I am off from what I was trying to say. What is the best way to word that?
I think that was fine.
Okay.
If you're voting to accept the proposal and then request the estimation or now you're going to have me messed up.
I'm sorry.
And then request the funds from the applicant in the amount of $3,300.
And we can do that on a single vote, correct? All right. In that case, I'd like to call a roll call vote to approve the selection of BSC Group for the independent third-party review for Century Mill Road, map 3.D, parcel 75, and that the full cost of that peer review, a total of $3,300, be passed along to the applicants. All right. All those in favor of said proposal, say aye. And again, we'll start with Emily.
Okay, I'm back. Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
And Rebecca, I'm an aye as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And then the next is a motion to vote to continue until the next meeting.
Yeah, per their email. All right, so in that case, I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for Century Mill Road, map 3.D, parcel 75, until our next public hearing, Tuesday, June 1st at 7:15 p.m.
Yep.
All right, do I hear a second for that?
Second.
All right, all those in favor of continuing, starting with Emily,
Hi.
Bill,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and Rebecca. I'm an aye as well.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Do you want to move to Condyne?
Yes.
Because
And then I believe the other representatives have entered, but so as we do wonderful housekeeping and administrative work in town hall, we realize that there is, and the property owner is also aware of this, there is in funds in the account for work under an order of conditions that has expired and was never began, that was filed in 2014 for 580 Main Street. They will be filing a request for certificate of compliance with and requesting it under the fact that the work had never begun. So at this time, I would like the commission to consider a vote to close out that account, because when they refile, it will be necessary for them to basically be refunded that amount. And then if they wish to use that same amount, then they'll be able to issue a new check. But at this time, it's funds sitting there for work that never began. And it sounds as though they're not going to do that work since the order has expired, and they'll have to refile anyways, even if they were going to do that exact same project. And just to note, the commission also has the ability to just wait until they request the COC and then address this at that time. But I did just want to bring up this opportunity as it came to our attention as we're digging through the files for this property.
and I believe my understanding this is it probably makes our accounting a lot cleaner going forward, and remove some stress from our huge town hall staff. So I would be so inclined. I would not have an issue with it. I would ask two quick questions. If we were to vote to release it, it would be to release it to, is it Condyne LLC, Condyne Inc., is it just Condyne?
I would just say the property owners of 580 Main Street.
Ah, that works.
Yep.
And the second thing I would ask is it is it fine just to mention the escrow associated with 580 Main Street, or do I need to give an exact amount?
I believe the amount is $1,500.
All right. Is it best if I give that amount? Or the full escrow?
Yes, I would probably say the full amount held for the 2014 expired order of conditions.
Okay. Other commission members, do you understand what it is we're looking to do here? Do you have questions, comments, concerns? Okay. I will ask any members of the public here to comment on this evening. Okay. In that case, I will call for a roll call vote to consider releasing the escrow for 580 Main Street in the amount of the full escrow for 580 Main Street to the property owners on account that the work for the project was never begun and the original order of conditions has in fact expired. All those in favor of returning that escrow to the property owner, please say aye, starting with Emily.
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
Lori.
Aye.
And Rebecca, I am an aye as well.
Thank you. Would help if I wasn't muted. We do have Seth Donahoe and Robert Pace present for the update regarding the Keys Farm Moderator Way enforcement that was issued by the commission. So first, I would like the commission just to memorialize through a vote that that enforcement order has been issued so that you can then sign it and we can send that off in our files. And then once the commission does that, I would encourage the chair to request the developer and representatives to provide an update as far as coming into compliance with that enforcement.
Sure. And for us to memorialize, Rebecca, is there good wording?
I would just say vote to issue an enforcement order.
Yep. For the Keys Farm subdevelopment, or for the Keys Farm development.
I will grab you the date in just a second, but yeah.
Appreciate that. Yep.
So the date of issuance was May 3rd.
Okay. In that case, I'd like to call a roll call vote for the Conservation Commission to issue an enforcement order to the Keys Farm subdivision for infractions memorialized and originally stated on May 3rd, 2021. All those in favor, starting with Emily?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
And Rebecca, I am an aye as well.
Perfect. So that document will be there for your signing, for your signatures as well. And I'll send a copy off to DEP for the records and hours, and then the applicant will receive an updated copy as well. If you would like, Mr. Chair, I will unmute Seth Donahoe and he can provide an update.
That would be excellent. Please do so.
Good evening.
Hello. Do you just want to provide an update on what work has been done and how it has been brought into compliance with the order?
Yep. So this is Seth Donahoe with Dillis and Roy. Robert Pace, the developer, is also on the call tonight. Should there be any questions for him? We did receive the enforcement order and associated letters with that, and we provided a reply to that. One of the items that we were requested to complete is an inspection of there were some areas that were subject to prior remediation work, and these were generally the areas below the stormwater outfalls. They had been subject to prior removal of some sediment early in the development process, and then some restoration of those areas. So we did inspect those areas, and we found that there was no signs of additional carryover of silt. We provided some auger sample photos, and it shows a clean, continuous A horizon that doesn't have any gray silt bandings that would be typical if there was an ongoing issue. So I've been to the site several times over the past few weeks, both when it's dry and after rain events, and all stormwater outfalls were conveying a small trickle of water out, but all of the water that was coming out at the time that I was there was clean, silt-free. So that the basins to that end are working as designed, and the areas below them seem to be in good shape with much of our native vegetation coming back and becoming established. So when we started this process related to this enforcement order, it was very early in the growing season. So a lot of the emergent vegetation was not there yet, but there is signs that those plants are coming back now. One of the items that we included in our reply to is is a punch list that I believe addresses the items that were within the enforcement order. There are a total of 12 items on that list, and bringing those to completion would hopefully put us in a position to move forward with a request for certificate of compliance, as all of the lots in the subdivision have been conveyed at this point, and the individual lots are really not in question at this point. It's basically establishing permanent vegetation in a couple key areas, and then making sure that the catch basins are clean and fully functional as well. So I can go through those 12 items in detail if the commission would like, or if you have a copy, I can hit on any key points that you guys feel are relevant.
If possible, Seth, it doesn't have to be in depth, total depth detail, but a quick rundown of those 12 would be appreciated.
Okay. And so as I mentioned, this was kind of our idea of some of the action items that needed to be completed before we could request a certificate of compliance. So our goal would be, if we can successfully complete these in the short term, we'd like to move forward with the certificate of compliance as well. So item 1 is to clean out the catch basins. That had been done periodically throughout the development. We're recommending that the depth of sediment in each catch basin is measured. And if there should be a 4-foot sump in each catch basin, if that's more than 2 feet full. So if there's 2 feet of accumulated sediment or more, then that particular basin should be cleaned. And prior to a request for certificate of compliance, everything will have to be cleaned out again as well. So that's just to ensure that they're able to function as designed in moving forward. Item 2, which was in your order, or enforcement order, was to address Basin 2 functional issues. As I said, every time I've been at the site, Basin 2 appears to be fully functional. It does have some side slopes that have been prone to some erosion, and just partially to the time of year, and partially need to put some loam in place on them. They do not have full vegetation on them. So we're recommending that is done where it's sparse, and make sure that is brought into a permanent stabilized side slopes on those. Maintain erosion controls on a daily basis. So we've acknowledged that this task should be much less burdensome in going forward, and that the erosion controls basically circumnavigate the entire development area, which includes the now developed lots. So a lot of those lots have reached their final finished grades. They all have lawns on them to be maintained as lawn area. So we don't really anticipate having any issues behind the individual houses at this point, but we will continue to monitor the barriers around the stormwater basins in any area where the runoff could channelize going down the road or down the sidewalk.
Seth, just briefly, I want to touch upon that. So that's the erosion control specific to wetland jurisdictional areas. And then the other item I wanted to just jump in and request, as you're going through these items, do you have a benchmark time frame for completion? Just because I believe that was part of what we requested in the enforcement order as well.
If it's all right with you, Rebecca, I can run through the items, and then we can ask Bob Pace to turn on his microphone, and he can fill you guys in on when they plan to complete all that. And we'd essentially, if these action items are agreeable, we essentially like to add an additional column to it with an anticipated completion date, and then a blank column next to that to document when each of those items is indeed complete. And
Okay.
And as we move forward with that, if there was any delay in that, we certainly shoot you an email and let you know why, and make sure it's not going to be an issue. But at this point, I'll stray from the topic a little bit. Mr. Pace has sold all the lots in the development. He sincerely desires to complete this process at this point. They would like to be done building there and leave it with something that the neighborhood and both the town can enjoy at this point.
Seth, do you mind if I just ask a quick question about Basin 2
Go ahead.
you just talked about? You mentioned that it was functioning during the site inspection, but I think several weeks ago, it didn't appear to be functioning and it looked like there was a lot of sediment that was sitting in the bottom. It's an infiltration basin, correct?
Correct.
So there shouldn't be standing water for days at a time. And there was standing water and there was a lot of sediment buildup from all the erosion that had happened on the slopes. And I was wondering if you thought that like, and this is a question for you too, Rebecca, if we needed to request that get cleaned out so that the system can function properly.
So we did request that as part of the enforcement, as Seth mentioned about cleaning out the, he talked about the catch basins, but also basin 2, talking about it, the functional issue, which he did touch upon, but you're absolutely right, Emily. When we were out on site, which I noted in one of the letters that accompanied the enforcement order, there was in fact standing water. It had been that way for a couple of days, but I guess to further Emily's question, Seth, when you had been out on site, had that basin been cleaned at all?
So I'm looking at a photo that was included with our response. I took the photograph on April 28th, and I estimated about 4 inches of standing water in the basin at that time. And it's definitely, it shows that there's vegetation actually on the bottom in areas that it has been ponding. I can share my screen if that helps, or ideally, we're certainly going to, as these basins dry out, we'll certainly investigate the depth of sediment at the bottom. And if they need to be cleaned out, that would be something that would be included in this. So I can add that as a 13th action item to this table.
Yeah, there was a lot of buildup of sediment, especially your photos looking basically east, right? So it all along the bottom there, especially on the opposite, not the opposite side further east, but on the opposite side on this side of the riprap, or the berm, I should say. There was a lot of sediment buildup and it wasn't draining when we were there. And I noticed in the letter, it says that they are observed to be functioning during site inspections. But I think, as Rebecca had stated, one of the issues we had was that it wasn't functioning and there is a buildup of sediment on the bottom and it's not functioning as an infiltration basin.
So we're okay with adding that to the punch list then. And
Okay.
we'll update you on that one. So we're on to item 4, was repair erosion controls at basin outlets. We'll just real generally, that has actually been done. The contractor completed that on May 5th, and that involved replacing any damaged silt fence. Some new wattles were installed in those areas as well. That was to both basin 2 and basin 3. Basin 1 is fully functional. At this point, the erosion barriers, when I've been there, at times they've only been holding back clean water. So as this progresses, I think it would be ideal to actually remove those barriers, as that basin is no longer in need of them and it's fully vegetated the entire area around there.
You're talking about what
Basin,
basin?
basin 1, the one closest to the entry of the site.
Okay. The question I have about the toe of the slope near basin 3 on it's a relatively sharp corner here as you come around from 13 to lot 2. And I was curious if that deposit at the corner there, which seems to be reoccurring, has been removed at all.
It was.
Okay.
So a separate item in our punch list is, I call it the slope between basin 3 and Moderator Way. It had been hydroseeded, it had been tracked, or I'm not sure if it was hydroseeded or conventionally seeded, but it had been seeded and the growing on that is rather sparse. And over the winter season, it appears that some of the loam has indeed migrated a little bit. And so we are going to verify the sufficiency of the loam on that slope, replace as necessary, and then we're calling to seed that area as well. And so I'll touch on that later in the list.
Okay, I'll wait for it later in the list then.
So items 5 and 6 have to do with the open space trailhead and the access road to them. And I understand it's the commission's desire that that is continually maintained, both the trail and the roadway. I was not a part of the issuance of the original order of conditions, but in reading through it, I could not find anything for that. And the open space and the trail land has actually been deeded to the town at this point. And so that's more of a question for Mr. Pace than it is for myself, but we've acknowledged that that is something that was in your request.
I appreciate that. The only thing I will mention from that is it was agreed upon, and I'll look through the order as well, but it was agreed upon, at least during a public meeting, that the contractor would remove some of the material on the surface and some of that debris, which they did. But there's a coil of wire right in the middle of the trail, just off of the gravel. And that is definitely a priority that we would like to still be removed. And it was understood that that was supposed to be removed when they did the gravel access into the open space. So again, it was just surface debris and material that was to be removed. That was one of the primary issues there. And then I'll look through again regarding the maintenance. If they could run through that first section with a weed whacker, that would be helpful. But the removal of that cable or wire, whatever it is there, it's very obvious. And I'm sure there were images from past public meetings. If that can be removed, that's definitely the priority.
Is it an item that existed from years ago, or is it something that is from
It's from years ago, but it's on the surface.
Okay.
And that's why it was discussed, because we didn't want to dig up and have a farm dump type situation where you remove something that's not on the surface and it sometimes causes more damage. Where this is on the surface, it's clear they could remove it, and that it was supposed to be removed, but it still remains.
Okay, so we'll circle back with Bob on that when we're done. So item 7 is to deploy temporary erosion control barriers. That's fully acknowledged. It is minimally needed at this point in time, as there's nothing going on. We do anticipate that there will be seeding and loam going on, so there will be extra barriers on site to protect those areas as they're brought into their final vegetated states. Number 8 is trail must be maintained until certificate of compliance is issued. Again, we can circle back with Bob, same issue as we just discussed. Number 9 is that you desired a wetland replication or remediation areas to ensure their success. So we provided that report, and we'll provide ongoing reports as we continue through the growing season here to make sure that that is still maintaining coverage. All signs point to that is a non-issue at this time, though, as that area has essentially been left alone for a full growing season, and it is fully vegetated at this time.
What is the frequency of the reporting that you're expecting to provide?
We will probably be every 2 weeks, and then when there's actually work being conducted on the site, we hope to be more frequent than that. And I hope that this is a relatively short-lived thing, because I hope that we are discussing final completion of these items tonight in a short time frame. Stabilize Basin 2 with vegetation, that tied back to an earlier item. So we're calling to fill in, there are some visible rivulets where things have, or erosion has basically eaten out small channels in the side. So we're going to fill those in, and then we're calling for that to be seeded with the conservation wildlife mix at the specified rate by the manufacturer. So that should give it a ongoing mix of better vegetation on those slopes too, as opposed to just grass. It was requested that the stump grindings of Basin 2 and Basin 3, so these are the downstream sides of the basin, they have been stabilized with stump grindings. They are stable at this time. It was requested that we overseed that area as well, so same seed mix will be applied over the top of the stump grindings. And Rebecca and I had a quick conversation related to this, and that the intent is not to remove the stump grindings, let them rot in place, and the seed mix will mix in the low spots in that. So the end result in the near term isn't going to be a completely vegetated downslope on those. It's pockets And over time, as the wood material decays, it'll improve just by the nature of the type of plants that are in that mix.
Seth, can I ask a question about the slopes on basins 2 and 3?
Yep.
How many times through the duration of the project have they been seeded?
I couldn't give you a answer on that one, actually. So maybe Bob can, and if we can't tonight, we can report back to you.
I'm wondering, I think more than once. I'm just wondering if, I believe it's been twice, but Bob could probably verify that. I'm curious, especially with Basin 3 that has a really long, steep slope. I'm curious if it would make sense to put some small plantings in there to slow down the erosion and let the seed catch. I don't know if that is a better solution than overseeding. And then if we get a big rainstorm again and it washes everything down, I know there were wattles put on the slope and there's still a lot of erosion happening and the seed isn't really taking. I'm just curious if it would make sense to put like some small native shrubs or, you know, some trees in there and let it kind of, you know, vegetate more, and aside from just having a meadow mix.
Yeah, so the basin, I call it the Basin 3 slope, and that's the slope that's actually between the basin and Moderator Way. It's not actually a part of the basin, but unfortunately it's tributary to the basin.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can talk with Bob about an alternative for that slope as well. And that's the slope I mentioned earlier in the discussion, that the seed is sparse on that, and we would like to remedy that and need to remedy that in the near term.
It's a really long hill too. You know, it's not, I feel like you get a good rainstorm and it's just carrying everything down. I know Basin 2 as well didn't really take with the seed. And again, I'm just curious if it makes sense to put some plantings in there to kind of slow down the flow of water.
So Basin 2 does have, I don't know what type of tree, some type of conifer, a row of them above it. One of the issues that we have with Basin 2 is, as the lots have been conveyed, some of the lots uphill, everybody's added patios, there's some type of terrace garden, and there's just generally ongoing work in those backyards. And unfortunately, some of it ends up down that way as well. And there was a long-term solution for that put in place late last year, and hopefully that'll relieve some of the burden in that area as well.
So 2 additional points with that I haven't seen yet. So I believe Emily is specifically talking about Basin 2 just slightly up gradient. She's not even referring to the most southerly portion of Basin 2, where that easement area, if you can see on my screen, and just vegetating that immediate slope there next to those. I think you're right. It's a couple of evergreen trees, and then you have your wattles, and then you have some rills that have formed around it. But Emily, is that the area you're referring to?
Yeah, I'm talking about the northern slope of Basin 2, the infiltration basin there, and the evergreen trees are on one side of but to the left of the berm there, I don't think there are any plantings there. There's the plantings I assumed were more for privacy for the house that's there, or not privacy, but just to kind of create a break from the pond to the basin to the house. I didn't realize those, I don't think they're on the slope. I think they're on the flat above the slope. Where I'm suggesting, do we put some small plantings on the slopes themselves and kind of get some good roots in there to kind of slow down the migration of the seed and the soil when we get a heavy rainstorm?
Mm-hmm. So thank you for clarifying that, Emily. I think, and I'm sure Seth may touch upon this as well, but we don't necessarily want to encourage woody vegetation along the slope, because that can impact the integrity of it. But certainly a ground cover or something might be considered by the applicant. The other item I wanted to touch upon, potentially to be used in both areas, which I haven't seen suggested yet, is some sort of jute netting or something that will hold and then allow the applicant to seed, maybe with a tackifier, that will have a better success rate over those steeper slopes in areas that may see more runoff. But I will let you continue, Seth.
Well, that sums up the action items on the list, and it seems we've added 2 items to that as we've gone through. So there were 12 items, so now a total of 14. As far as planting the basin, so this is a public road and it is subject to acceptance by the town, and the planning board's approval required specifics for the basin as well. So as long as the planning board and the conservation commission desires for these align, we could certainly talk about doing more than what was shown on the plan. But we're kind of in a rock and a hard place where one board's expecting one thing and their consultant may desire it to be low maintenance, emergent vegetation and grasses. And then of course, I think that you guys would prefer to see a mix of facultative to fac wet plants extending down into the basin in that area. So we can certainly talk to Bob about what he's agreeable to implementing in that area, and then we can check with the planning board if an agreement's reached to on that, and make sure that that would not contradict what they're trying to do on everything here. None of that would prevent us from seeding the area now as well, though. I think that's something that needs to be done so that there's not ongoing issues there. So I don't think it would be a waste of time to do that. And if we agree on plantings on those slopes, then we can certainly make pockets for those to go in the stabilized areas.
I think that sounds like a great approach, Seth, and I'm not going to speak for the commission. Obviously, they can speak for themselves, but I do want to just state that obviously the priority for both boards would be compliance in the most general form and stabilization. So I think if you and your client are proposing or want to incorporate what the commission's talking about regarding some additional plantings to potentially accommodate and offset some of that erosion and allow for stabilization, that's fine. But I think ultimately, and I would ask the chair, ultimately it sounds like we want it stabilized. And that's really the major issue, so that there's no significant erosion in the future.
Yeah, well, I would tend to agree with that. I mean, even as I was hearing, I was thinking about, and I think Rebecca mentioned it, jute netting, using something like that. If you don't want to change what's being planted there, and if you think another board might have trouble with it, like you say, it's already covered under the orders to be seeded. It's just a question of that seed all tends to wash away before it can establish. So maybe it's jute netting, maybe it's taking another approach with the seeding to protect the seeding until it has a chance to establish. Because I tend to follow with Rebecca. I'm, as long as it's done and done competently, I'm fine with whatever method, so long as it's functioning the way it was supposed to. And it doesn't keep failing would be another one. Like I said, we've tried seeding a number of times now. I think Emily brought that up, and it just doesn't seem to work. And I think that's one of the reasons why she was proposing, hey, maybe try something different. But it seems like these enforcement orders keep coming. It seems like this keeps failing. It seems like this keeps being a problem. I like the punch list as you set it up, but when it comes to reseeding areas, I would say, maybe change that to reseeding with a different approach or with additional enhancements such as jute netting to try to ensure that the seeding actually takes this time. I'd hate to have you come back, and a month from now, we're going to reseed it again. We're out of compliance. We're going to reseed it again. It's starting to get a little silly. At some point, you got to try something different.
No, we're all on the same page, and,
Okay.
and that's depending on when they plan to execute this. It could be as simple as a hydroseed with a tackifier in it, and then continuous rows of wattles on it, or any of the netting products, jute netting or one of the alternatives to that could be implemented on it as well. And from my opinion, at this point, it's not simply said spread the seed and wait for it to take. As you said, that I don't want to be back here again. You guys are all lovely people, but I would like to resolve this time.
Seth, what happens if it's seeded and then we don't see rain for 3 weeks? Is there, the seed isn't germinating if it's not getting watered. Is there any plan to water it or get that process going? Because I'm imagining we've had some really hot sunny days and we've had little rainstorms here and there in the evenings, and I can see my vegetable garden drying up through the day, and I'm just imagining that this whole slope gets seeded and then gets hit with sun for a week and no rain. How is that seed going to take? How is it going to germinate? Is there a plan to irrigate?
So the conservation and wildlife mix, it actually has instructions for a summertime application in that, and that includes over mulching it. And some of those seeds will remain dormant until they can actually take. The difficulty we have with water is, as there's not municipal water at the site, we would have to figure out a way to get a temporary water source for that slope. So it's a very fair question and something that we're going to have to address if it's to be done. We were hoping this is going to be done in the very short term when the weather is going to cooperate. But given this week and the anticipated outlook, we may have to come up with an alternative for that.
What do you over mulch it with? Or what is it over mulched with? Is it like a compost, or is it a loam dries out pretty quickly in the sun?
So some of the jute netting products sometimes come with an over mulching type woven into them.
Got it.
It's
And
a
does
very
that
non-technical way of explaining that, but
I'm just looking on their spec sheet right now, so I don't have the exact answer. What I envisioned in putting this sheet together is, as we pick dates, we will then tell you how we're going to implement it too, and that has to be kind of weather dependent things here. So like ideally, we say we're going to address whatever items 1 through 6 next week or something, and some of these are going to have kind of custom formulated methods to get it to go, so that we're not coming back and doing items 1 through 6 the week after as well.
I'm sorry, I was just reading through. Alice Hutchins had some comments.
So one of the comments, and I appreciate that it's been provided, but it's specific to some planning board rules and regulations in their jurisdiction, which is probably applicable as well, regarding some planting. So if you have to be in compliance with those, I would assume you will be following that for this seeding process, considering it's under their jurisdiction as well.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
trying to read a couple things at once here, get all these things in. I believe the Mass DOT spec is in relation to the shoulders of the roadway.
Yep.
So it's a little bit different item that we're discussing here.
So I guess and again, I'm noting the fact that planning board regulations state that, and I understand it may be a different area on site, but I guess the point is you could look at that and incorporate something similar that is then successful. And I think that's an example of potentially how you could incorporate something different.
There's absolutely no problem with that. I mean, we agree that there's areas that need to be patched in. I've worked on a pretty substantial environmental remediation site where some of these New England wetland plant seed mixes were used almost exclusively, and their ability to survive and take is rather remarkable too. So it's not cheap stuff. It's not like your regular Scott's Kentucky bluegrass or anything like that. There's quite a variety. The one I'm looking at here, it looks like there's about 14 varieties of plants with a ability to survive in both wet and dry conditions on there. And they're everything from grass varieties all the way up to some of our wildflowers. So it does give a good mix, and they tend to take very, very well.
other commission members have questions? Mr. Pace, if Bob Pace here, if there's anything you'd like to add to this at this time?
No, I think Seth has addressed everything.
Okay. Rebecca, any members of the public have questions or comments regarding this at this time?
I actually have a question, and actually the member of the public had the same question. Seth, earlier on, you said at the end of this list, we would talk about a time frame, and that is one of the questions from the public as well, but I think that's important for the commission to know. I know you said we'd go through the itemized list and talk about the time frames for each item, but I think for the suite of items, what are your expectations, or is there, are you looking to seed within the next 2 weeks and then set a deadline? And you can certainly email me those deadlines, but I think the commission would prefer to know at this meeting when you are expecting to complete all of these items, but then also an interim date as well.
Bob, can you address that?
We're planning to start in earnest next week. I would think that by the end of next week, quite a bit of the stuff will be done. We've requested a planning board walkthrough the following week. I just want to make sure I have my weeks. The first week in June. So, specifically, I don't have an answer for you. Okay, but I think that there'll be, for example, the seating. Okay, and okay for slope 3 is we're planning to do that next week.
So, Bob, would it be fair to say that the seeding would at least be completed by, and again, this is the seeding, not growth from that, obviously, because these things take time, but the seeding would be done by the May 27th?
No, that's incorrect. Okay.
That's next week.
The seating to be done, I would hope it would be done by May 27th. Okay.
So then I think I would ask the commission then to request that the seating be done by the first week of June. So we'll say by June 3rd, it should be seated. Is that reasonable, Bob?
Is that the end of the week on June 3rd?
It's
Thursday. It's a Thursday.
Yeah, say June 4th, and that'll be fine.
Okay.
Are we going to review a plan for that? Like we just talked about some different options depending on weather and temperatures. Will we be able to have some discussion about what methods are going to be used?
So typically, and the commission can certainly request the applicant and their representative to send them their approach to this. And our next meeting is on June 1st. So they can certainly send it to us prior to then. We can discuss it, and then the seating should be done or will be done, like Bob said, by the 4th, at the end of that week. The only thing I would caution the commission, as we do with every application, is not to suggest specific items, but rather keep it relatively general. I think we've noted a few items already that may assist in the stabilization, but again, the commission is not suggesting specific items. That's on the applicant and their representative to address. The key is the stabilization. Try something different like jute netting or plantings that would then supplement and reduce erosion and stabilize the area that would accompany seeding. I think it's appropriate to bring up the question of a water source, considering I believe we're still in a drought, unless I'm mistaken. So that's very noteworthy. But so it would be mindful of the commission to request the plan from the representative and the applicant to be noted at the next June 1st meeting, and then the seeding to be completed by June 4th. Would that make sense, Emily?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
I think it would, as you said, I don't want to, we're not suggesting methods, but it would be nice to just see what the plan is, because we discussed, 3 or 4 different options tonight, and watering as well, what the plan is for watering, and hopefully if there's watering done, it's not done at 2:00 in the afternoon when the sun is hot.
Yeah, and I think that fits in with Seth's frequency of reporting that he established he would be doing earlier anyways. Additionally, I would also ask of either Bob or Seth while they're on the call here, when do you expect to have this entire list completed by?
We're going to go as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Okay, I don't have an exact date. Okay, I think I would be able to evaluate that, within a couple weeks, we'll see what's left.
Sure. And I guess the reason why I ask is specific to the enforcement order and coming into compliance with that. That's the priority. I understand you're working on the other items associated with the order of conditions and continuing that effort to work towards a certificate of compliance. But my inquiry about when the work will be completed is specific to the items in the enforcement order, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is the same checklist that Seth has provided this evening. Is that correct?
It generally
Yes.
covers everything, in my opinion. And truthfully, the seating is the bulk of it,
Okay.
and probably the most time sensitive as well.
Okay. And that will
I
be
have
completed
one
by June 4th.
Sorry, I have one question about item 7, and I made a note here and I forgot to ask it when we were there. It says temporary erosion controls will be implemented as necessary. Are there specific locations that we saw that needed temporary erosion control that should be noted in here, or
Yep.
on a plan or something?
So
Well, any area subject to seeding should have temporary erosion controls either installed or readily available. And the slope above Basin 3, if it's not jute netting, it'll need a substantial amount of either wattles or silt fence to prevent stuff from migrating.
So this is specific to seeded slopes, this item.
it's specific to stabilization
Okay.
of the site. So just noting that they may need to use supplemental erosion and sediment controls, as Seth noted.
Okay, got it.
It looks like we have a question.
Yes. Would you like me to unmute them?
Please do. Yes.
Okay. So Liz Hutchins.
Hi, everyone. This is Liz Hutchins. I'm from 75 Moderator Way. So I actually have a couple of questions and just a couple quick comments. So I have established a lawn on my lot by myself completely because we were given dirt. And the dirt that we have up in this area is super like clay dirt, and there's really not a lot of nutrients in it. So I just want to make sure that everybody, including Seth and Bob, are aware that fertilizer is like key critical to getting any sort of vegetation to grow, regardless of where it is in this environment. We have that same, like whatever you call it, the wood chipping root stuff on one of our hills that we have. And literally you can't even get weeds to grow in it because it's just so thick and there's nothing in there for anything to grab onto. So there's just no nutrients at all. So when we're talking about establishing vegetation, in my opinion, I think that's a big reason why it didn't work the first couple times. I don't know that it was so much the erosion portion of it and the washout as much as it was the fact that it wasn't being watered and it wasn't being fertilized. And we've also noted that in other areas that obviously are outside of your jurisdiction, it's the same type of situation. For the homeowners that were actually watering and fertilizing their lawn, it did actually grow. So that's just kind of a side comment that I want to make sure I say, because I think that's really important for our specific. I have another question about the woody vegetation. I know Emily had mentioned potentially doing that around the basin too, but Rebecca, you had mentioned that adding woody vegetation is not always a great idea around the basins. So I'm curious what the board's opinion is on all of the woody vegetation that has been put around Basin 1 at the top of the basins. There's a whole bunch of like probably 6 to 8 native oak trees planted at the top of the basin around the edges. My concern is that as those trees grow, they're going to get huge, obviously. So what does that mean for the root structures of these trees in that basin? Are they going to infiltrate the basin? Will that make a difference? I don't know, but I just want to bring that up based on Emily and Rebecca's conversation earlier.
So Liz, I think I need to provide a clarification. So what I was referring to about planting or potentially refraining from planting woody vegetation is along steep slopes, not at the top of slopes or at the toe of slopes.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted that clarification because I was like, wait, there's a whole bunch of trees in there. All right, so then the last question I have is about Basin 3. So I think it's pretty well established that Basin 3 is just not draining, end of story. We literally have geese in our neighborhood now because they have made it their home. So the problem is, and why all the water is flooding into these wetlands, is because the water level just on baseline is so high. So how are we draining this so that it actually becomes an effective basin, and what is the time frame on that?
Brian, I think maybe defer the last question to Seth.
I
think we should defer the question in relation to what type of basin that is, in addition to the question.
Yes, if possible, Seth, would you be able to field that one?
Sure. So Basin 3 has an outlet control structure in it. Actually, all basins have them in it, and their goal is when water is ponded in it, it actually severely limits what can come out of the basin. All 3 basins in the development have emergency overflow points, and since the development has been completed, I have not seen any signs of any of them being utilized. So those are riprap slopes. Some of them actually have a concrete weir in them. And if the structure that's supposed to limit the flow going out to the wetlands isn't able to keep up, there's another point to basically prevent things from flooding that'll allow excess water to go over the berm at a designated point. So those aren't being utilized at this point. So that shows that the outlet control structures are functioning as intended. Even when I've been to the site after heavy rain events, the flow coming out of specifically Basin 3's pipe is pretty minor compared to the diameter of the pipe and the diameter that is designed to potentially let go from that area.
Okay,
So
Seth, when just out of curiosity, because like I obviously live here, so I'm there all the time, but when have you been on site after a storm or during a storm?
List.
Yeah.
Just a point of order, if you can ask your questions to the board. I know it's difficult on Zoom, we all forget, but just direct your questions to the board or the chair. Thank you.
Sure, so then could the board let me know when Seth has documented that he's been on site and visibly seen what's coming out of there? I'm just curious because I'm living here and being there after every single storm have a very different perspective of exactly what's coming out of there. So I'm just curious when he's been there.
Right. Seth, are you able to provide some dates or?
Sure. So I was there on April 28th, and that was after a period of rain. Last fall, Rebecca and I were actually there in the rain looking at this same event. And we've been there many, many times over the past couple of years. And I'll be out there again in the coming weeks, and I'll continue to watch that. So that basin will be subject to an as-built survey to make sure that everything is indeed at the elevations that it's supposed to be. But to the point, it's not going over the emergency overflow weirs on that.
Okay, but I guess
I think there's 2 questions here. One is the water supposed to be pooling? to the extent it is, and therefore attracting different wildlife, as Melissa just stated, or the other aspect of it that Seth's touching upon, that it is functioning properly because we don't have, and I've been out on site, there hasn't been significant outflow out of that pipe. Even during a rainstorm, it's obviously increased during a rainstorm. But what Seth is stating is the basin isn't holding enough water to then push through that outflow and over top, which would then be resulting in an issue as far as the amount of water that it's holding. Would that be correct, Seth?
Correct. So to be clear, all the basins are designed to hold water. That's their point. The water from the subdivision goes down into the basins, and truthfully, the collection method, it's already removing a lot of the material that shouldn't be there via the catch basins. There's protections in those, and then they're conveyed to the basin, where under bigger storm events or under prolonged periods of rain, there is going to be ponding in all of the basins, and that water will remain for a period of time as it dissipates either through the outlet structure or it infiltrates.
Okay, so just so the Conservation Board is aware, during planning board meetings, it has been discussed extensively that all three that we have in our lot are only supposed to hold water for 72 hours and are supposed to completely drain within 72 hours. That is how they were designed. My understanding is that's what's in the stormwater pollution prevention plan that is no longer available. So I'm just kind of trying to understand why we continue to have sitting water there. Some of the other basins, I mean, none of the basins, in my opinion, are compliant. All of them will have water for longer than 72 hours, but some will eventually drain 5, 6, 7 days later. Basin 3 consistently has feet and feet and feet of water just sitting in it. So, and my understanding from the planning board is that that's not how it's designed. So I'm just trying to kind of understand what's going on.
Seth, were the basins designed for that 72-hour regulation? Was that based on what storm event?
So I unfortunately, I wasn't part of that portion of the process. So I will have to get that answer for you offline and report it back to you. And these are all things, the road itself is subject to acceptance. The town could choose not to accept it if they felt that it wasn't working, but there are checks and balances to all of these components to make sure that it's doing what it's intended to do. And I believe the town even has a outside peer review consultant for that portion of this as well.
Mr. Chair, I think we have another resident who has a question.
Please put them through.
Okay, if you could just state your name and your address, that would be helpful. I think I just unmuted. Oh, there you go.
Yes, hi. This is Lori Coe. I'm at Lot 1. We have the second retention basin in the development, and so I was in agreement with Liz that I was under the impression, per Bob Pace, that retention area was supposed to drain within 72 hours. That our basin has not been dry since the snow melted, and it's a major concern in terms of mosquitoes and bugs, but also the drainage that is in there. You can tell it has like oil. It's got like tons of sediment, and it smells really bad. So, and my other point is that was supposed to be cleaned out and sprayed for grass, so that grass would grow, and that if there were to have water in it, that it would drain fairly quickly. But it actually just looks at this point like a catch-all sewer with like sticks and rocks and like tons and tons of sediment and muck that does not dry out.
Mr. Chair, if I could just
Go ahead.
address that
Sorry.
briefly. So, Lori, that was actually, I'm not sure if you were here for the first portion of this discussion, but that is on their checklist. They will be seeding, and that needs to be completed by June 4th.
Okay, I'm sorry, yeah, I just jumped on. I missed the
That's
beginning
okay.
part
I
of that.
just, that's why I figured I would let you know that that has been discussed and that was incorporated into the enforcement order as well. So that was noted as being an issue and an unstable area. So that is
And
incorporated into their current checklist.
Okay, and so are they gonna drain it and then clean it out and then spray? Because it's all rocks, it's all sticks, it's like there's trash in it. I mean, I go out there and pick, but when like the wind blows, there's trash sitting in, it's really an eyesore, like a major eyesore. And beyond the fact is the mosquito concern hugely with my 3 children playing in the yard frequently. But there's a lot of, I mean, it's just very mucky and it smells really bad.
So that again is an item that has been addressed. Some of the items were cleaning catch basins, addressing the Basin 2 functional concern, which Seth went over earlier in the meeting, and then the seeding, reducing erosion, and stabilizing the site, which incorporates the items that you're talking about.
I'm curious, Seth, I don't know if you remember this one, but I remember going out for the site visits before anything was built. I remember going out when they were putting in that original roadway, and it was noted in the field that it was extremely high seasonal groundwater. I mean, the ground was literally oozing water in certain areas, and I think it was Brandon who was out with us back then, Ducharme, and trying to figure out where is this coming from, and he said it looks like it's just really high seasonal groundwater. Could that be affecting these basins? I'm trying to think in our order of conditions, if we said to meet the stormwater standards, which would be the 72-hour drain, or if we had anything about the draining. But I do remember that was an issue, especially up by where that road dead ends. It looked like there was a ton of just water just oozing from the ground once that original road went in. And that's what it was attributed to in the field. Curious, do you think that would affect why some of those detention ponds might not be draining?
I mean, so the storm events they're all hypothetical to begin with. So in a perfect world, if that exact event happened, then we could maybe scientifically say that the exact outcome happened. We don't get that benefit all the time. There might be one small event followed by a bigger event and then a series of little oddities and different humidity levels and things. So the groundwater issue is something that during the approval process for the subdivision is vetted by the town. Actually, the basins themselves have to meet a groundwater offset, and the town's consulting engineer verified that was indeed the case as part of the drainage calculations for the subdivision.
And again, it might not be for us, and I'll look more into it too. But if there is that rule with stormwater management that it's supposed to drain within 72 hours, if groundwater is affecting that, I think it has to be rethought. It's not a question of the groundwater, and sure, we might have everything got signed off on, it was fine, but everything I think was signed off on saying it needs to meet the stormwater management basic conditions. And if that's draining within 72 hours, and I'd ask the neighbors too, they live there, if they want to take a daily picture, I can't have Rebecca out there every single day taking a look, but if it's not draining within 3 days, it seems like it's a bigger problem. It seems like this, and I'm happy to go down this punch list. It seems like those 12 plus the extra 2 would cover initially things that would bring you into compliance with what the Conservation Commission looks at for. But if those aren't draining up to stormwater management, it seems like there's a deeper problem there. And again, I'm not sure. Do you know, are they supposed to meet that standard? Is that something that you know offhand? Is that a state requirement?
It's not something I know offhand. Again, I wasn't actually involved in the approval process for the subdivision end of things. So I'm happy to look into it and see what the goal was. And then certainly, and the applicant has to do that as part of working for their final sign off with the town through the planning board as well. So that's something, as Bob mentioned, that he's meeting with the planning board out there, and as things are brought into full compliance, the town certainly won't accept it if it's not in a condition that's acceptable.
Sure.
Right, and the town does have a peer review, or, excuse me, a consultant working for the planning board to review exactly that regarding the stormwater infrastructure and the functionality of it. So they are addressing that, and they provide us updates as well with that information.
And one thing the commission should be aware too is the subdivision approval is done under certain assumptions and models of what's going to happen on individual lots. Some of that has changed, and there's no fault of the applicant or no fault of the property owners either. They've chosen to do what they want with their lots, and that's impacted things elsewhere too. So it would be normal to have some discrepancies in that, but the burden is to make sure that it's still doing what it intends to do. And I think just physically looking at it, what's coming out of those basins is in a controlled fashion at this point. So from the commission's standpoint, I really think that it is indeed doing its job at this point.
I see we have some other questions from members of the public. At some point in time, we might have to limit debate on this a bit so we can actually get through tonight's agenda. But if Rebecca, if you want to allow the next person in to ask a question.
Sure, I would just remind people commenting that this is new comments. We have heard your comments. So as long as it is a new comment, that is fine. But we are trying to be sensitive with time as well. And then of course that it's jurisdictional to the Conservation Commission's resource areas under our bylaw and Wetlands Protection Act. So Liz, go ahead.
I just have a clarification question. So is the intention then to seed before we know sort of what the end goal is with these basins? Because it sounds like that's kind of up in now. But if there are issues with the basins that do need to be fixed, they will need to come in with construction equipment to fix that, which will destroy the potential vegetation. But I just want to confirm that the expectation is still, regardless, that these should be seeded by June 4th.
Yes.
Regardless.
The expectation is that this needs to be stabilized and brought into compliance with the current enforcement order. There are access roads, as I'm sure you're aware, that were permitted, and those would be the access roads if they're doing work in the future. But again, the primary concern is that the slopes are not stable, they're not vegetated, they need to be stabilized, and we may see a result from that is showing that the basins are working, or we may see that it doesn't significantly impact that function. But that is a primary concern of the Conservation Commission at this time, along with ensuring that the erosion and sediment controls are in good working order and functioning properly. But right now it's the enforcement order coming into compliance with those items, and then of course the order of conditions. And then if there's something discovered later on, then that needs to be addressed at that time.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There looks like to be another question.
Yes, Lori.
Yes, hi, I'm sorry, one last thing. So just in regards to the runoff that runs into that retention area at the base of my property, lot 1, there's also, it not only comes out of the drainage pipe there, but it also, there's a huge amount of drainage that races across my yard and has caused a significant crevice and reduced the amount of dirt in tons of areas. So you can see, like, it's not just coming from the sewer system, but it's coming from across my yard and washing away seed and dirt that we put down every couple of months. So, and I know they put in riprap swales and things to reduce the drainage, but if you saw it in a rainstorm, you could see that it still comes across my yard regardless.
Thank you.
Right. Rebecca, where does this leave us tonight? Is there anything we need to vote on? I I said, we've gone through the punch list of what they're proposing they do.
Mhm.
We have voted on the enforcement order.
Yeah.
Is there anything else?
You've
Go ahead.
established a deadline for the seating as well. The only thing is I would suggest that the commission request the list that Seth has provided with dates or benchmarks associated with completing the items on that list. I know we've set June 4th, obviously, but the other items I think would benefit from having a timeline as well. And then if they don't meet the timeline for the other items that are not currently, that do not currently have a solid deadline, that they then update us within their bi-weekly report or weekly reports as to how far off they are from those deadlines.
Sure. Would this be something we vote on, or is this simply us making the suggestions to the applicant and on how to bring everything into compliance?
I think just stating we request you to supply deadlines to the conservation office by whatever date you want the deadlines to be provided to you by. Again, not the deadlines themselves being created, but the document that incorporates the deadlines. And I would say that should be by the end of this week, honestly. And then if they're changing because of site conditions, et cetera, they can update on that. But I think it's important that the commission formally request that from the applicant at this time to just ensure coming into compliance with the enforcement order.
Sure. So I guess I would like to make a motion that the commission formally request from the applicants for the Keys Farm subdivision that the punch list of items be updated with the 2 extra items discussed this evening, that a column including a time frame or timeline be added to that as well, and that the seating be completed no later than June 4th, and a full plan be submitted to us prior to our next meeting on June 1st. Rebecca, are there any aspects you think I missed in that motion?
Nope, I would just caution the applicant representative that although the chair has said June 1st, the deadline for submittal, as always, is by noon the Thursday prior to be considered at June 1st.
That said,
so there's no miscommunication. Can we just state that date? June 1st, so that would put us at June 27th at noon.
Let me pull up the calendar. Yes. Yep.
May 27th.
May 27th. Yeah.
May 27th at noon. Yes, that is correct.
And if I just may ask the commission quickly,
Please.
related to the issues with the trail, I'm a little foggy on what the agreement was on that. We're going to remove that wire or cable, whatever it is. And that resolves the issues related to that.
Yep, so the surface debris that was, I would suggest to the commission to confirm that it's the surface debris that was agreed upon to be removed in a prior public meeting, including that cable, which I believe the rest of it has been removed. But I can dig through to see exactly what that incorporated. But I believe that would then meet that issue. And then since the land's been turned over to the town, the commission can start maintaining that.
I was to say that's my recollection as well. I mean, I can't say 100% for sure if we find the public meeting, but I know it was discussed. And I know it was removal of the surface trash was one of the big things that was discussed. It was a bit of a dumping ground going up that trail.
Okay, thank you for the
should be in the public here. It should be in the public minutes, if not in the order of conditions. I seem to remember at one point in time memorializing it in something. So does that make sense, Seth? Or
yes, sir. That's fine.
I guess so, yeah, it'll make sense.
We had a couple bullet items on the list, and I think we can those will all be wrapped into one, and we'll take care of those items. So,
all right.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Do I hear a second for the motion for the vote?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, say aye, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an aye as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
Good night then, and thank you for your time.
All right.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Bob.
Commission members have a chance to look at the May 4th meeting minutes. And if so, did you have any questions, comments, corrections?
Nope.
Hearing none, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes for our May 4th, 2021 meeting as drafted and submitted at this evening's meeting. Do I hear a second for that?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an aye as well.
Thank you. The other couple of items we have is that our volunteer land steward position is still open. Applications are welcome. I suggested we table the operation maintenance plan drafts until next meeting, just because I wanted to leave time for the Taggart land management plan that was time sensitive. And then for Forbush Mill, we have our internship opportunity advertised at this time, which is to create a trail from Forbush Mill along the Still River tributary. And the goal is to connect to the Taggart property and incorporate educational signage and QR code led information along the river, talking about not only ecological information, but also tying into the federally designated Nashua River downstream. It's going to be advertised in the paper as well for another week. And then at that time, I'll see who we have for applicants. We already talked about the land management plan. The last item is regarding Bower Springs. So we did receive a revised estimate and information related to the contracted management of Bowers and Butternut from Henderson Stryker, incorporating the comments from the last meeting. And so I would ask that the commission vote to authorize that contract for work. And I did send it to you. I will pull it up now as well, though. And in general, the one item that was not addressed, or it was addressed rather, but I had some discussion, did some research on it, was a comment about only spot mowing versus the annual mow. And the reason why the spot mowing was proposed originally for June or July is because it allows for that variation in the vegetation that's growing, but removing the full mow at least once a year. So we do that in the fall typically. As you can see here, it keeps pressure on the woody invasives. It helps maintain the meadow grasses. If we weren't to do that, it starts encouraging that woody vegetation and invasive species to take advantage of the field edges as well as the field itself. So the annual mow is sort of the minimal amount of mowing in order to keep it meadow. But so we could add the spring spot mow to encourage that diversity, but I don't know that it's necessary. And I think the comment last time was, can we spot mow to encourage the meadow? The commission always has the ability to start transitioning to more of a woody vegetation there and managing it that way. But I think this is one of our properties, one of the only two properties we have as just that natural meadow area and habitat that I would think the commission would hope to continue managing it in that way. So we have that item. We did remove the monitoring for invasive species and the invasive species pulling out of the trees and the edges because we've had volunteers working on this and we hope to continue that in the future as well. There are some woody invasives in 3 specific areas that it is important to stay on top of. Some of them also, poison ivy isn't an invasive, but we do want to stay on top of that. And I wouldn't want any of our volunteers focusing on the poison ivy. So if we contract it out, I think that's appropriate, as terrible as that is to say. And we do have some tree of heaven that we need to stay on top of before it becomes more aggressive than it already is. And then, of course, we have the fall mowing planned as well to mow all the field areas.
Rebecca, what is the method of invasive management in that second part for Bowers at the top here?
Just mowing.
No, sorry, second page where you just were where
Yep.
Those
Here.
areas. What is the management method done by Henderson Stryker?
Just mowing. They have different, they basically go in and mow it or cut it down and just continuously to suppress the early growth. We don't at this time treat with anything. The commission always holds the ability to request to treat with an herbicide if necessary, but we have yet to need that or request it. I'm sorry, there's a bug flying.
So specifically to meadow and field areas, this is not around the edge of the ponds.
So no, it is not around the edge of the ponds, but it does, and I forget which of the 3 it is, I apologize. There is one location which is actually within 100 feet of a bordering vegetated wetland. So it does still fall in that area. I know in the past, I've jokingly brought up bringing goats onto the property, but I think that is something that would be worth looking into to see what the cost difference is. I think last year it was relatively short notice, so it didn't really work out in order to have a whole herd come set up, and there wasn't anyone nearby who was available. But I think we had a commission member last time who suggested they might bring their goats just to sort of show a pilot or trial. So I think that would be cool and interesting if they would suggest doing that again. But if not, I think in the future, I will be looking into the difference in cost and approach if we wanted to approach it that way. But I think some of these areas we're not to the point yet where we need chemical treatment because we've been staying on top of it on an annual or biannual basis. But certainly if we stopped doing that, it would get to the point where we would need to treat with an herbicide in order to gain a little bit of ground, pun not intended, on their success.
Other questions regarding this contract? All right. I did not have anything else. Rebecca, is it voting to accept? Or
it's a vote to authorize.
Yep.
This work and vote to authorize and accept, yes.
Okay.
So that I can then request the additional information he needs to send in, so then we can get him moving on this project.
Okay. In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we accept and authorize the contract with Henderson Stryker for the 2021 maintenance laid out in their draft proposal discussed here this evening. Do I hear a second for that?
Second.
All those in favor, starting with Emily.
Aye.
Bill Payne.
Aye.
Lori Stevenson.
Aye.
And Rebecca, I am an aye myself.
Wonderful, thank you. That is all I have this evening.
All right. Does anyone have any new business?
I have a question.
Please.
There are, and I may have missed the boat on this, but there are 5 mature trees that are tagged on, it's actually on Spectacle Hill Road. So it's after South Bolton turns and then Spectacle Hill. And I know there's a hearing. The tree warden is holding a hearing, but they are in the buffer zone. So I'm just curious if when you're in a situation where there are trees that need to be removed potentially for safety by the tree warden, does it warrant input from Conservation Commission if it's within a wetland buffer zone? On a
The
regular
short answer is yes. I can send you another copy or refer you to the plans for the Spectacle Hill Drainage Project, because I believe that's what it is in relation to.
Got it.
If it is not, though, you are absolutely correct.
So it's part of a bigger design project.
I believe it's part of the project that already has an order of conditions issued for it.
Got it.
And they're just taking their next step in the process of the permits that they need. But I can send you, like I said, I believe it's online under the commission's current projects, but I'll send you that link to the plan, and then you can compare where you saw the marked trees.
Okay. Yeah, it only concerned me because they were mature hardwoods. And I figured that, that wasn't an issue, but I thought I'd ask.
If I remember correctly, our former DPW had agonized over that too.
Yeah.
Because they had to come out, because there has to be a natural swale that goes along there in order to deal with the flooding. And he looked at ways to avoid it and just kind of said, I think we have to do this, sadly.
And we reviewed that a while ago, right? That was, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also the commission authorizes their conservation agent, being me, to authorize up to 3 trees to be removed if they're clearly dead, dying, or decaying. So I go out, do a site visit, and then if it's clear, and then I always follow up with a letter to all of you, and we haven't had those in a while, but that's also something to know. But where it's on a public roadway like that, there's significantly large trees, and there's multiple of them, that would probably be done through an RDA if it weren't already incorporated into a permit.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask one last question? So you just said public road, which made me think, because I had in my head that I can usually see the front detention basin off of Moderator Way. But I was like, I drive Hudson Road often. I was like, next time I'm going down there, I should just drive up the road and just see what I can see from my car, just so I can get a better look at what's going on there. Yep. But is that still a private road if it hasn't been accepted by the town?
Yes, it is a private roadway, but the commission in their order of conditions has the ability to enter onto the premises at any time to review compliance with the order of conditions. So you are well within your right to go and review these areas.
Just to drive up and take. Okay, excellent. Yes. Excellent.
Just as long as you're not altering anything on the property.
No,
that's fine.
No. Look from my car. Yes. Any other new business? Hearing none, I would like to make a motion that we hereby adjourn our Tuesday, May 18th, 2021 meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission. Do I hear a second for adjourning? Nobody wants to go. All right. All those in favor, starting with Emily Winter.
Aye.
Bill Payne.
Aye.
Lori Stevenson.
Aye.
And Rebecca, I am as well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, and have a great evening.
Thank you. I'll take care.
Good night.